Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com or download the app in the iOS App Store today. Use code SPOTTRACK, get yourself $20. Get going on the best social market betting place on the internet in the United States. Nearly every state's involved. Reduce the VIG, get rid of the house. You set the bets, you set the lines, you set the strength and the size of your bets. Make it a competition. Throw it out there for a team, for a family. Go head to head. Visit bettoredge.com today to get started. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, July 28th. A little bit of a late start because plenty to get to. Kind of taking notes, doing some homework, recuperating from a big weekend, and we're going to bounce around just a bit. Bookends, baseball talk, plenty of football inside of it. That's kind of going to be the resume, the recipe, the ingredients for the next few weeks as the NFL season really starts to ramp up here and the baseball trade deadline comes and goes this Thursday. So we'll be hitting more on that later in the week. We'll start with baseball. Seth Lugo, starting pitcher for the Kansas City Royals, has agreed to a 2-year, $46 million contract extension. He was one of the big starters on the block. You could see the writing on the wall that Kansas City had some youth, that they were ready. They're probably ready to pay right now in Ragans. They've locked in a few players, certainly offensively speaking as well. But that's an up-and-coming team who's competing right now, and keeping Lugo makes more sense than losing him. And unless they were blown away with an offer, which obviously they weren't, he's going to be now in the picture for at least 2 more seasons, possibly more. There's a vesting option that can guarantee in year 3, 2028 of this contract based on some pitching thresholds that we're still trying to figure out. But for the most part, locked in this year at $15 million, next year at $21.5 through 2026 as well. That includes a $3 million signing bonus over the next 2 seasons to go with that. So there's plenty to get to here. The Royals have started the process of sort of holding pat, as many teams, it appears, are going to do. If you listen to the ESPN broadcast last night, Mets-Giants, Buster Olney was pretty transparent about the fact that it's going to be a reliever-heavy deadline, as always. Maybe not much more than that. He said it without saying it. You can see that there's a lot of teams that made late charges here throughout the summer that have changed their plans for this trade deadline. There's still going to be sellers, but there's going to be 3-to-1 buyers than sellers, which is generally leading up to a disappointing trade deadline for Major League Baseball, unfortunately. We're going to have names. There'll be a shocker. There'll be a name out there. Maybe it is the Braves, who I sort of teased last week, who have continued to spiral and now have just about as many injuries now as they did this time last season. And now it's a trend for them. Now it's not even an anomaly or an incident. It's a trend. They've got young players who are well paid, but are not staying healthy. In fact, I believe I saw a note, all 5 of their starting rotation to start the year are right now on the injured list for the Atlanta Braves. So tough times, a sinking team. It's by no means a team that should be ripping the Band-Aid off and starting over. But we're hearing the Ozuna name. I'm not sure how warranted he is out there. There's some names. There's certainly some names in the bullpen, maybe even on the back end of the rotation, that could get tossed out there in this trade deadline and could make some things interesting. But for the most part, we'll see what comes over the next 72 hours. Dan Soman and I will break down every single move from guts to glory this Wednesday and or Thursday, depending on how things sort of flesh out right up against that deadline. But Kansas City gets us started early with an extension to keep their starting pitching staff intact because it's young, controlled, and Seth Lugo. That's sort of how that thing goes right now. And they certainly like who they are in the immediacy and want to keep this going for maybe a 2 to 3 year window. Football news. Shemar Stewart has agreed to his rookie contract to remain, or I guess start, his Cincinnati Bengals career. This is way less dramatic than I thought it was going to be at the end of the day, unfortunately, because you were hoping that, at least I think most of us were hoping, that the player was going to get a little bit more out of this than he ultimately ended up getting. And what he got is a $500,000 advance on his signing bonus. So whatever the original pay structure was for this signing bonus, which is not nothing. Okay, it's a $10.5 million signing bonus. There was a pay structure, probably a little today, more in November or December, maybe even a little bit trickling into to January, February to get it into the next calendar year. But he got a $500,000 advance, and it's not nothing. Okay, we've said it a ton of times in this show. Every agent I ever talked to has said this: money in hand is much better than money owed. All right, so it's a minute win. However, the Bengals got their language. They got their full void language in the event that any kind of conduct detrimental comes into play. Most teams already have that language built in. Cincinnati, for whatever reason, was holding out in doing that. And now they have it. And now that they have it with Stewart, I would expect every single first-round pick going forward to have that language in their contract as well, because that's what has happened here. So small compromise, kind of a big win for Cincinnati based on what they're looking to do and just protections that teams are trying to build in, especially with these fully guaranteed contracts. But that's what happened here. It's a 4-year, nearly $19 million guarantee over the course of the next 4 seasons with a $10.4 million signing bonus. There's probably some training camp bonuses built into this thing that we're trying to confirm. But for the most part, Cincinnati likes to delay every payment humanly possible, and it's tough to blame them. When those things are possible, take advantage of it. That's what's happened here. And Stewart gets himself an extra $500,000 of cash today versus having to wait for that second cash period built into his specific contract. Small victories, but I guess having him back at camp is the biggest victory, because Trey Hendrickson is not anywhere near the Bengals organization as he waits for at least a multi-year guarantee offer from this Bengals front office. But one done, one big one still to go in Cincinnati. We'll see where that gets us. The LA Chargers got one done this weekend, signing left tackle Rashawn Slater to a massive 4-year, $114 million contract extension through 2029. He was on a 5th-year option, so you knew this was forthcoming. It was just a matter of how it looks, not when it was coming. It's 5 years, over $133 million total now. But the new money average is 28.5 a year. That's historic. That's top all time for offensive linemen. If you flip that to a percent of cap, that AAV, it actually drops to 6th. So that's definitely a trend we've been seeing with all these contracts. Yes, we're breaking APY records, but in terms of the cap inflation, things are falling behind quite a bit. And you can understand that. All right. There's not really a push to pay a line with the cap because they don't have to. There's no rules in place. There's no percent built into the CBA like we deal with the NBA on every single contract. The rookie wage scale is the only percentage-based system that exists in the NFL. Everything else is the wild, wild west. So if the marker is 28 and change per year, 28 and a half per year is a pretty nice upgrade. It's not nearly enough to reset the market in this regard because the cap is 280. And, and when the 28 and change happened, it was 250. But we'll continue to monitor those, and we'll see if that's the next iteration of, especially with the quarterbacks and some of these bigger positions. We'll see if that's the metric that starts to get pushed forward, because they has been falling behind with this latest rash of NFL contract extensions. Slater gets $92 million practically guaranteed, 56 of that right now today through 2026. So pretty good cash flow, really strong guarantees. That $92 million, by the way, that's a number one. That's a top all time for offensive linemen. So the 56 guaranteed at sign is actually second to Andrew Thomas, as is the 2-year cash. And the 3-year payout in this actually drops the third all time among offensive linemen, but it's still $82 million over the next 3 years, keeping in mind that there's a 5th-year option that had to essentially get rolled into this contract. So there was 1 year of team control. You can understand a little bit of a dip in the 3-year cash flow in that regard, giving the Chargers a bit of a break. However, it's 4 years, just over $105 million. That's the practicality on this contract with a 5th-year fluff, but pretty strong stuff for a franchise starting left tackle, probably for a long time. He'll get out of this contract before 30 years old, and assuming all is well with the Chargers, get a massive, massive third contract to take him into and through his 30s for the foreseeable future. So a good get, not a totally historic get, but if you're talking practical guarantees and APY, tops all time among offensive linemen. Who's next? That's the big conversation to take away from many of these training camps, unless you're following the stats of training camps, which I'm not. So I try to tune out as much as possible, but there's plenty of financial business to get done here. Some of it we mentioned often: Trey Hendrickson, Micah Parsons. Those things are certainly in motion, or at least attempting to be in motion. But there's plenty of names that I thought would be done that aren't done. I'm going to start at the bottom of a piece I wrote a while ago and sort of give you the greatest hits here. Safety Kyle Hamilton with the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens haven't done either of their massive extensions that they've talked about publicly, which is quarterback Lamar Jackson and safety Kyle Hamilton. Doesn't mean they haven't been active. They've done some work, but Hamilton is extension eligible for the first time right now. So there's not a super rush. They can certainly take this into 2026, get him on his 5th-year option, which has already been exercised, and do their dirty work next summer if that's the plan. But I would assume earlier the better on a 24-year-old safety who is arguably the best at his position in all of football already. So we'll see if that's one of these things that comes up over the next couple of weeks. I would assume that name would be included in plenty of lists. And we'll see about Lamar, because that's somewhat quieted down since really early March, when Baltimore came out and said, we're going to do something about those cap hits next year. And oh, by the way, sweeten the pot a little bit to make sure Lamar stays happy, because his stats are insanely historic. He's obviously got the pedigree. He's got the winning streak. He's got some postseason wins now. Just hasn't gotten to the finish line. And oh, by the way, there's plenty of players like that out there, okay, including the pending MVP or the incumbent MVP in Josh Allen. So the past 3 MVPs, massive paydays, tons of production, and no Super Bowls to their credit. That would be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Josh got his contract done. We'll see if Lamar follows suit over the course of the next couple of weeks. And for those who haven't taken a look recently, our algorithm, which is generally pretty strict, not that we come in too low in many cases, but for the most part, we're not accounting for super inflation, and neither are the contracts that hit the books, as I just noted with the Slater contract. But just on its surface, without doing any kind of work, throwing Lamar Jackson into our valuation algorithm pumps out $68 million per year. So if you think this is a simple contract, the stats, the production, the pedigree, the age, 28 and a half years old, tell us otherwise. This should be the contract that makes us all go, wow, in this league, because that is $8 million more than Dak Prescott's $60 million APY right now. And if Baltimore wants to do right, that's what the math says is right, according to our algorithm right now. So we'll keep an eye out for that one for sure, because I don't imagine it gets to that number, but there's no reason it shouldn't be. And anybody who's followed this guy closely over the past 4 or 5 seasons knows that some bounces haven't gone his way, but everything else about his play has been top tier, top 1, 2, 3 in this league. And that's pretty much undefeated right now. Who else? We know McLaurin is back. Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver for the Washington Commanders, but he's back without a contract, and it sounds like that contract is not close. He's avoiding the fines. He's holding in with an injury, so he's certainly not going through the motion to get himself hurt. But as we talked about last Thursday with Brandon, I'm not sure this was a necessity for the Washington Commanders. I'd love to see it happen. He'd love to see it happen. He may compromise on something, around the Chris Godwin world, where we know he had more money on the table elsewhere, wanted to stay in Tampa Bay, wanted to be Baker Mayfield's number 1B option. McLaurin might have to do the exact same thing to stick around. He's 30, okay, or he will be in a couple of weeks here. He's not making enough money currently right now, just under $20 million cash, but just how more can he be guaranteed over the next, season and a half? Can he get a 2027 guarantee out of this contract? It's seemingly looking like more and more less. So this may be a situation where they lock in this year, they lock in next year, and then that's it. And will he compromise at that price, whatever that offer may be right now? We'll see. But he's certainly back. That's good news for everybody. He's already lost himself about $800,000 because he missed minicamp. He forfeited his workout bonus, which was $500,000, and he missed 4 days of training camp, which surmises the $200,000 loss. So he didn't get to that 1 million mark, but we'll see just how much he can squeeze out of an extension to stay in Washington over the course of the next few months or maybe even seasons. There's lots of other wide receivers, by the way. Garrett Wilson's done. He was one of 4 on my list early back in June. But McLaurin, no. Drake London, not yet. Cortland Sutton, not yet. He's got a bit of an injury situation in training camp, which I'm air quoting right now. We shall see if Denver gets anything done there. There's a few players in Denver. I believe Zach Allen certainly looking for something as well in that regard. So Denver could be busy here over the course of the next few weeks as they ramp up around year 2 of the Bo Nix rookie contract value situation. Offensive lineman for days. We've seen Trey Smith get his contract. We saw Zach Tom get paid. We saw Rashawn Slater get paid this weekend. There are plenty more. All right. Baltimore could go back to the pool with center Tyler Linderbaum. Tyler Smith in Dallas probably should get something done this offseason. We've heard about Bernard Raymond in Indianapolis in negotiations. That's one I would expect to hear rather soon here. And then we get to the edge rushers. Watts in, Henderson, no, Parsons, no. And it seems like Aiden Hutchinson is a waiting game. Okay. Obviously coming off the gruesome leg injury. He's just extension eligible now for the first time. So he's super value this year, 5th-year option exercise next year. Looks like Detroit's going to wait till next offseason on that one. And we're in a wait and see mode. And then a few more. Trent McDuffie, the cornerback in Kansas City. I mentioned this last week. He's the last cornerback to fall here. Everybody else has gotten their money, including Sauce Gardner with the most recent re-up, somewhat top of the market contract. McDuffie should be following suit. That Gardner contract could be a carbon copy of what McDuffie should be getting with Kansas City. And again, we'll see if it happens this offseason. It's been sort of quiet. It's early. There's this year plus the 5th-year exercise next year. So there's time if Kansas City wants to sort of stagger this one out a little bit. But that's definitely a name to watch. And then the only other 2, well, I have 3 actually. James Cook seems like a no in Buffalo, but he is at training camp and somewhat participating. He's going to be a good soldier about this, which is the right move at his position. Kyron Williams is the same deal in Los Angeles. And what we have heard, some inklings that some sort of contract extension could be getting close there. I've got both these players at about $10.5 million per year, so 3 for 31-ish on the extension for both. If they both accepted it, it'd get done tomorrow. But I think both are looking more in that 14 to 15 million per year range. It's probably unrealistic, especially this late in the game, where they're not going to be holding out a preseason and lose those salaries or regular season games to get close to losing that accrued season, which keeps their rights with their current teams respectively anyway. So 2 running backs to watch there. And then the only other one is this. And I've been teasing this as much as possible, really since the turn of the new year, because he outkicked his contract the second he walked in the door, essentially. And that's Baker Mayfield. We are starting to hear some rumors. Tampa Bay might be doing right by this guy, even though it's year 2 of a 3-year contract. He's got a full guarantee this year. And there is a $40 million salary built into next season. But he maxed out the incentives last year. He's done everything that's been asked of him in his resuscitated career after flaming out in Cleveland for sure. But he's back. He's the guy. Players are re-signing with Tampa Bay to be with him specifically. You can see the culture that's been created quickly around Baker Mayfield in the community, with the organization, and on the field. I have a feeling we're getting pretty close on a massive, massive re-up for Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, and it's good to see, because I think everybody's kind of played these properly over the course of the last few years, including Baker, kind of bouncing around a little bit to find his sea legs. I think the landing spot with McVay and the Rams was a really smart move. We've kind of seen that work with a couple players now, but it's time. He signed a 1-year, $4 million contract initially, maxed it out with incentives, maxed out year 1 of a 3 for 100 this past season, and is now entering year 2. He's done enough. He's showcased enough is my point. So I think that's a sneaky name to watch, even though we are hearing some rumblings that could be getting to fruition here over the course of the next few weeks. Let's flip the switch to baseball. 5 members of the Baseball Hall of Fame were added yesterday, including 4 somewhat modern era players. And I took some time this morning to detail their financial careers on Spotrac.com. There's some really interesting players here, and I didn't expect it But the one I found to be most interesting when we got into the nerdiness was Dave Parker, a player who, man, big time baseball card guy for me growing up. And that was certainly one of those cards you love to get. How about this? So I knew about him being sort of baseball's first $1 million man. He signed what was reported to be a 5-year, $5 million extension in Pittsburgh back in 1979. And it's sort of been labeled, earmarked as the first $1 million contract. I did some digging, actually found this contract, this PDF on the interwebs. And I read this thing 11 times because I didn't want to be misreporting. But everything I've seen about this contract says it's actually way more than $5 million. In fact, it's about $7.75 million in total value. And that's not even including the incentives that were built into it. There was some MVP stuff that he didn't hit and all that. So it could have been even more. It could have been basically an $8 million contract. And the caveat was, wait for it, 5.6 million of this was deferred, significantly deferred. Okay, so 5.6 million deferred in 1979 is a massive amount of money. But B, there was a 19-year deferral on this thing. So they paid it as $1 million in 1988. And then for the next 18 and a half seasons, he earned himself $250,000 straight through. So this was kind of Bobby Bo before Bobby Bo became Bobby Bo. And Dave Parker's sort of been that polarizing guy in the league for a bunch of reasons, some off field, most of it on field. But this was the contract that started the contracts kind of before this. I'm not saying this is the first deferred contract ever, but this is a massive deferral on an already massive contract, right? It's being labeled as this big AAV contract at the first $1 million mark per year. It was worth more, and Pittsburgh did as much as possible to make the value work for them by deferring 75% of this thing out of the gate. So those details are all live on his player page on Spotrac if you want to see it all in its glory, including as much detail as I could find with his early stuff. He moved on to Cincy and signed some sort of incomplete contracts. There was some off the field stuff that got kind of nudged in there, and the 1994 season was kind of a blur a little bit here. So I did as much possible. Most of this stuff is estimated. But like I said, I was able to find the big contract and get those out there. He signed for $6,000, by the way, back in 1970. And it took him a minute to get to the Major League Baseball, about 3.5 years in the minors before he was officially purchased by Pittsburgh. And then he was off and running. Finished up with Milwaukee, and then sort of a postseason rental for the Toronto Blue Jays to finish it all out in 1991. But a little bit over 17 million earned for Dave Parker in those 19 seasons, despite a little bit of a gap and some sporadic stuff built into the middle of that thing. CC Sabathia, one of my all-time favorites. I grew up in Buffalo, where he actually got his minor league start as a member of the Cleveland Indians, and the Buffalo Bisons were a long-time farm team for them. So CC was a local guy for me kind of growing up. Obviously a big baseball card guy. This was one of those guys you just wanted to follow because he was kind of a mini Shaq figure, right? He was big, large, super personable, and just went out there and did his thing. And that's sort of how he remains now in the public-facing media version of Major League Baseball. Just kind of like a must-hear, must-listen guy in terms of breaking down the game and elevating the game with his personality. But a number 20 overall pick, CC Sabathia, got a $1.3 million bonus back in 1998 to do so, and didn't wait too long, because after 1 year of being purchased by the Cleveland Indians, he signed a 4-year, $9.5 million pre-arb extension that basically bought out the rest of his team control. Super popular in the Cleveland franchise to do this. They continue to do this with young players. That may be dwindling a little bit in the modern era here, but that's just been their way. And CC certainly bought into that with a nearly $10 million guarantee almost immediately out of the gate. He signed a 2-year, $17.5 million extension to remain in Cleveland for a little bit longer, but it was only about 1.5 years, because at that 2008 deadline, he was flipped to Milwaukee. You probably remember that deal, for a big-time swap of 4 players that ended up including Michael Brantley, who became one of Cleveland's all-time franchise players. So kind of pit per pit there. CC moves on. He becomes a rental in Milwaukee in 2008. And then the big boys came swinging for Cincy because that was enough of small market CC Sabathia. And the Yankees came in with a 7-year, $161 million contract, kept him there basically through, actually officially through the rest of his career. They added a $30 million, a $10 million, and an $8 million contract thereafter, and got Cincy up to $265 million earned over 19 years. So definitely one of the big splashiest career earners to come out of the 1998 draft, and a hell of a run, and still a hell of a run. Like I said, still closely attached to Major League Baseball. If you don't follow him at all, probably a pretty good guy to be following if you want to be amused and entertained along with some baseball stuff. Speaking of which, Ichiro Suzuki gave a hell of a speech yesterday per his long-awaited induction. Kind of insane that he wasn't unanimous. I'd put Ken Griffey Jr., his franchise colleague, in that same boat, but voters work in mysterious ways. Let's put it that way. I watched almost every single at bat from this player over his 19-year career, and I forgot, because I'm getting old, just how incredible year one was. Here's how we got there. He was posted by his Japanese team, Oryx Blue Wave, for what ended up being a $13.25 million posting fee. That's built into another 3 years, $14 million contract. That's what the base value of his foreign professional contract was when he started with Seattle. He was 27 years old, so he was past the threshold of needing to go through the draft process, or the international signing bonus process. So it was sort of an up for debate situation. Seattle won out for obvious reasons, got him on 3 for 14, except he earned way more than that. Why? Because in year one of Ichiro's career, he went off. Okay. He went off to the tune of Rookie of the Year, MVP, All-Star, top All-Star vote getter, top All-Star vote getter for the American League, obviously, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, and plenty, plenty more. And the reason I mentioned those things specifically is he had incentives built in for every single one of those throughout this first contract. And he maximized, okay? He maximized significantly over those first couple of seasons. Here's what he earned. He had a base value of $14 million. He added an extra $2.5 million in year one, 2.2 in year two, and 3.1 million in year three, making this first 3-year contract worth over almost $22 million when it was all said and done. He added basically $8 million of incentives on his rookie contract to start his Seattle Mariners career. He also had a full no trade clause on that contract. $7 million of it was deferred, so he made a little extra money down the road and helping out Seattle from a cash perspective. And obviously came out swinging in this league because it was there was concern about injuries, so they built in plate appearance incentives, not only in this contract, but in the extension that came thereafter. And he maximized every single plate appearance incentive that he was offered. Hit them all throughout the first 7 seasons. Year two, the second contract was 4 years, $44 million. He ended up just under $46 million on that. So maximized some of those incentives, had an all-star selection basically every year there through. And then we got to the big stuff. Then it became 5 years, $90 million for Ichiro. He started to see some of the decline. He's 34 at this point in time. Remember, he started at 27. So this is not your normal rookie situation. So he's 34 when he gets his $90 million contract, plays out 4 years in Seattle, and then is traded to the Yankees for the next 2.5 seasons, where he gets his last real big contract before finishing things off in Miami on smaller, 3.2, 1 for $2 million contracts. He's in his 40s at this point. And then he's at 45 years old. He signs a minor league contract with Seattle, which was somewhat ceremonial, but he was attempting to give it one last go. Ends up retiring basically just before the season starts and walking away from the game at that point in time. But $178 million in change over 19 seasons for Ichiro Suzuki. One hell of a career. And by the way, that's 19 seasons tacked on to everything he already did in Japan. So I know that stat's been out there, but the 3,000 hits starting at age 27, that's insanity. Okay. Insanity. And then you look at the overall, the financials are there. They're nice. They're big. But just the production, the consistency in the production with basically one franchise. Certainly he bounced around to the Yankees late in the game, but just a hell of a career. Great that it was kind of his day yesterday for the most part. And then one last player, Billy Wagner, the great reliever for Houston, drafted number 12 overall, got himself a $500,000 bonus, stayed about 2 years in the minor league system there, and then was purchased in 1995 to join the club. And then he was off and running. Minimum salaries to start the first couple of seasons. Then he signed a $10 million contract to kind of buy out most of arbitration, turned that into 3 for 27, and was off and running thereafter. So about 8 years in Houston to get things going. And then the Mets came swinging at 34 years old. 4 years, $43 million free agent contract to start the 2006 season. And he'd eventually be traded to Boston and latch on with Atlanta to finish off his career that lasted 16 years, earning him just under $95 million. So just missed that $100 million mark. But for a relief pitcher back when, they weren't getting the $20 million per year that Edwin Diaz and those players, Josh Hader is now, this guy way outkicked his coverage, both financially and for the most part on the field as well. So this was a much deserved honor, but also he's one of those pioneer players that took this position from a commodity to a financial requirement for teams, which is what we're seeing now. And we're going to continue to see it, especially at this trade deadline over the next couple of days, because as Buster Olney has laid out, it's going to be a lot of relievers and maybe not a lot more. So there's your homage to Billy Wagner and his $95 million that sort of paved the way for the Edwins and the Haders of the world to go out there and get their bank, which certainly they were able to do. Okay, plenty more to get to. A lot of dad work this week, a lot of trade stuff with the Major League Baseball. We will recap that Wednesday and or Thursday with Dan Soman. And obviously hoping for some NFL extensions to built in here as well. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Check Podcast.